will settle down in the next half an hour probably. Wow, 2 people to see a broken video. Brilliant. Oh, why is it taking so long to sort itself out? Improve? Does this improve things? We need to change focus. So weird with this camera. Really don't understand it. Wow. Hope nobody has epilepsy. 3 people. One like. It's going well. Imagine when I actually get a good video stream. It's crazy. Crazy camera. 2 likes. What can I say? I thought I'd just actually get the stream going. I know it's like I'm being teleported from the future or something. 4 people. How have I got 4 people to look at this? Gonna improve. I keep thinking if I change like focus or move stuff around, it will get better. It's crazy. Crazy. Down to 3 people. Wow. Don't worry, we'll get there. We'll get there. What should I do in the interim where this is just so bad? The internet should have stayed in the army. Great post, great. I absolutely agree. I'm pinning your message. I like town cars. Now, I like town cars. I know you like ThinkPads. So, I know I showed this on the live stream before, didn't I? There you go. In honor of your, what was it, your T60? Here you go. In fantastically bad video. It's my X60 with the strange, what do you call it? It's like a WAN card antenna. So I add on the side there. I've got the dock for it as well, but I'll put that away. But I mean, the dock's a dock, really. None of them really look any different. Yeah, there you go. It's had wear and tear, as you can see, marks on it and whatever, but it's a ThinkPad. And it's Libre booted as well. I know you're a Windows user. Classic XP, Vista, etc. There we go. Let's boot it up. Let's boot up the Libre boot. So yeah, today I've got quite a, I mean, it's always a cliche to say a hot take, but I've got I think a hot take on the internet, well, on the World Wide Web, really. Let's boot up the ThinkPad. Give me Libre or give me death. Yeah, so, well, of course, it's running the Libre boot. Well, it's starting to settle down the picture now. It's running the Libre boot BIOS. LibreBoot BIOS. And it's running Hyperbola Linux, which is something you don't often hear people talk about. If they talk about the Libre Linux, they usually talk about, when relation to Arch Linux, they talk about what's it called? I can't even think. I've been so delving into the history of the World Wide Web that I can't even remember what I'm talking about. Parabola, that's it. The only thing with, I probably talked about in that last live stream, the only reason I'm running Hyperbola is because I'm running a 32-bit x60. The 64-bit x60s are rarer. And Parabola's basic, I don't want to say this because maybe it's me, but basically the Parabola 32-bit is broken. So I had issues with the verification keys for downloading from their server. Basically, their keys haven't been updated from whatever their package maintainer is. And so it wouldn't work. Basically, I couldn't update Parabola. So Hyperbola, which is a stable distribution, and I'm not necessarily a fan of stable distributions, but with 32-bit, I am, because as you know, Linux on 32-bit or Linux desktop 32-bit is really not very well supported, and particularly a Libre distribution with completely free software. So Hyperbola is actually pretty good, and they still are going to be shipping a new version of it soon. I know this is probably not that interesting because I'm probably about the only person in the world who seems to use it. But believe it or not, that's my main computer and distribution. Unironically, I am running a 32-bit LibreBooted x60 with Hyperbola Linux, where they're trying to change it over to BSD. I mean, and I was going to do a video on one of the specific reasons I'm highlighting running a 32-bit Linux distro. Just say, I mean, I've been streaming or doing videos for a while now, and I just feel like I'm so out of the loop of communicating. But hey, Linux, right? It's just what it is, right? Like Linux, it's just rambling, right? I don't know what I'm saying. Anyway, so I don't know what I'm saying. I'm out the streaming video game for so long now, so bear with me. But yeah, I was going to show you what Hyperbola looks like, which isn't very exciting. Yeah, 32-bit has been left behind, which is a shame. And to be fair to Hyperbola, thanks apt take. To be fair to Hyperbola, they make 32-bit first class. So if you look at their documentation, they consider 32-bit and 64-bit equal. So 32-bit on Hyperbola is first class. And interestingly, there was a post recently by the co-creator maintainer of Hyperbola saying that some of their package decisions as well for their new version, they've not conceded on the 32-bit side. I think that's right. I can't remember. But basically, going forward, they consider 32-bit as first class. There's some problems with maintaining it in the long run, but they're not going to compromise, which I think is quite nice. So really, if you're in this niche where I am, I'm doing it for two reasons. One, because personally, I think this is good practice to have a Libre distribution. It's not perfect because I'm having to make compromises. But then if you're running proprietary, you're always making compromises. And in the tech world, everything's a compromise, including the World Wide Web, which I'm going to talk about soon. But with this as well, there's been scandals in the United Kingdom regarding prosecutions of people regarding software and this might seem a bit of a stretch, but for a long time, I'm not saying I was necessarily this person, but the FSF, or the Free Software Foundation, Libre software has become a bit of a joke in Linux, right? People don't really respect it anymore. People become so disconnected from the GNU core util side or the Unix side, let's say, and that's fine. I understand the evolution. Hi, Iron Fist. I understand the evolution of Linux. I understand the evolution of software, the evolution of tech stacks, if you like, all this kind of thing. And it, you know, like anything, it becomes devolved from its origins. And wasn't that a bit of their own causing? Not sure though. I'll come back to that. So, you know, Linux has come a long way, and having come a long way, it's kind of devolved. It's gone away from its origins, let's say. I don't want to be sentimental. It's not about being sentimental, but what it does mean is that, as we know, corporations in Linux are a huge thing now. Corporations invest a lot of money in the Linux kernel and the Linux development, different packages. Red Hat, as we know, are a huge contributor to various parts of Linux, sometimes controversially, some people like it, some people don't. But what I'm trying to do with what I'm doing is that the FSF is not a joke. And if you look at things happening around technology in just recent times, and I feel like I need to do a whole thing on this, and I'm going to try and do streams more regularly now, because I was setting up this computer and I was just sort of doing some other stuff like some research. However, it is important, I think. It's maybe an unattainable goal that people will always have in having completely Libre software, Libre system. It's becoming more and more difficult. But I think the principles there, and this was kind of, funny enough, inspired by a Luke Smith video, which at first I think I was like, really? Where he said, you know, that a lot of Linux YouTubers had gone away from the Libre side, and they were making fun of the FSF, which is fine, but forgetting how important they were, and they still are, really, for computing, for what's happening in the world of technology, even if you're making huge compromises in your computing ability, but also compromises every time you're using proprietary software. And we all do it. I use proprietary software all day. I use Windows systems for work. I use Linux systems for work, or whatever, tangentially. And I use Linux at home. I use Windows tangentially at home. But every time you're using proprietary stuff, you're making a compromise. It might seem it's not important. It might seem there's nothing at stake, but in the way that the consequences are not hyperbole, they're not theoretical. Somebody said, wasn't that a bit of their own causing? Not sure though. So the scan I'm talking about is the Horizon scandal specifically, and Capture scandal specifically. And this is related to our post office service, our postal service, where systems were in place that effectively had backdoors in their software. Nobody could see the code. It was all proprietary, even the government. And the post office at the time was technically owned by the government. And the post office, incredibly, have the power to bring a prosecution. So if you think of the police, or if you're in America, say an attorney or whatever it is, they can bring a prosecution, right? They bring evidence, they bring a prosecution. The post office, the people who send your letters, can bring about a prosecution. And what they were bringing about a prosecution was that they had basically franchises. So people would run a post office branch where people would send their post to be delivered. So you either put it in a post box, or you go to a branch and you maybe send a parcel, the traditional post office service in many countries. The people who owned the actual post office as a business, the government could bring about a prosecution against the people running this post office if they felt or they deemed that the people running the post office were stealing money. So you pay your money, the post office, that goes into what would traditionally be a cash register, and you'd have some sort of counting system. You'd have some means to count the cash at the end of the day. And their means to count was a system directly connected to the post office called Horizon. This was made by Fujitsu. Fujitsu's a famous company. You've probably heard of it. Maybe it's not as big on people's mind, but Fujitsu used to make a lot of cameras, all kinds of things. But they made software systems for the government, for the post office. And these systems were part of a contract where people who ran a post office branch had to have these systems, and they effectively they took in data and they or numbers from the system of sales and how much money had been made throughout the day and totaled it up. And the system effectively was compromised by backdoors that they wouldn't admit. So administrators remotely, or I say administrators, Fujitsu employees, developers, let's say software developers, could, from Fujitsu, remotely access these systems, right? And from this, they had instances where they were effectively changing the numbers in these post office branches. So they were changing the total. Imagine somebody remotely accessing your bank account and just changing numbers, right? So you think you've got $1,000 or pounds in your bank account, and the say 10 hours later, no transactions have happened, no record of transactions, no itinerary of details, just that $1,000 or pounds are now 1,100. Or in the post office branch case, you have taken 1,000 pounds or dollars, but the Fujitsu system says that actually you've taken $1,500. When you physically count up your cash, you find that you're $500 or pounds short, because the Fujitsu system, that you effectively have no way to see the code, you have no real evidence of the collection, you have no real evidence of the details, just that is your shortfall. You're 500 pounds or dollars short, right? And you owe this to the post office because this is the post office money. Your cut is at the end of what the post office has in their contract with you. So you might take a third of that at the end of the day. Irrespective of that, basically you are considered to have stolen that money. You owe the post office. So what would happen? The post office would demand these branches pay up, right? And it didn't matter, because they could invent any number, and people did. People put in these numbers in their system to balance the books, or people remotely accessed these systems from Fujitsu, changed the numbers for whatever reason, we don't truly know, maliciously or not, and people went bankrupt. They lost their business. They went to court because they were accused of stealing money from the post office, and they went to prison. Now, you would assume that one of the things happening here is, well, the courts would gather evidence, right? So you've got a proprietary system. The courts would say, well, let's see the evidence of the system. Let's see the code. Let's see an independent audit. Let's demonstrate an example of this system. And none of this happened. Incredibly, none of this happened. Now, I've heard an argument that there is a law that makes they call it mechanical systems inadmissible. But this is a misnomer, because a mechanical system, and any half-decent barrister or any half-decent prosecutor would make the argument that a mechanical system is not a computer system. A computer system might have mechanical parts, but a computer system is a software to hardware system, right? And therefore, if you can't see the mechanics of the software, how do you know it is inadmissible? And this is the thing. It was effectively Fujitsu and the post office saying, trust us, put these people into prison. And people killed themselves. People lost their lives because of this. Now, you might also say, well, you know, how does this really connect back to me as somebody? Well, I can't think off the top of my head because it hasn't been in my mind completely lately. But there's been a number of instances in recent times where, I mean, think of like the backdooring of encryption, right? The whole system of computer encryption, the very basis of security of the internet, the World Wide Web, which we've been talking about, being effectively backdoored by governments, right? Now, just in principle is not really encryption, right? If you can backdoor encryption, you don't have encryption. Now you could say, well, I'm happy for a government to have that, but in light of the way the world is, are you really happy with anybody having backdoor encryption? Think about software like WhatsApp. You know, again, whole companies make adverts. Now I've seen this. WhatsApp make a huge claim that their software is encrypted. Now it's encrypted, but they have the keys. This is a whole classic Linux, Unix, free software thing. Everybody knows in principle that if you don't hold the keys, you do not hold the encryption. They have the encryption at their discretion. Now, again, you can go into the morality of this and that. What I'm trying to say is that look what happened to the people at Horizon. They would have assumed that the post office, a respected institution in the United Kingdom, maybe not now, obviously, would not send them to prison. They would be able to present evidence. These people had no recourse. They went to prison for years for being accused of money they didn't steal. No way to present evidence that there was flaws in these systems. Nobody even basically asked. There were exceptions where people were supposed to demonstrate the system. Now, I've basically done a whole video now on Horizon and all these things, but sorry, I've gone off topic, but there we go. It's what it is. So look up the Horizon scandal, look up various things, look at what companies, particularly on the internet as well, have done. I think back to one of the things that started me on this sort of journey was Facebook. I don't use Facebook, but Facebook in Australia some years ago decided that because of the government in Australia forcing them to pay a royalty to newspapers for using their news feeds, wouldn't pay the news feeds. So instead, they cut everybody's news feed from Facebook. Now, you might think, well, don't use Facebook. But literally, millions of Australians overnight could not get news through their computers because what they do is they load up a browser, it automatically logs into Facebook. They see their feeds, including their news feeds. Now they had no news feeds. Now, again, you might think, well, big deal. Just go to another website. I agree. The problem is that we are becoming more and more inextricably linked to our computers and dependent on services that are not Libra, are not free. And if the compromise was so minuscule, maybe it'd be acceptable, but it's only getting worse. Even recently, okay? So they were talking about Google Android. You all know Android via phones and whatever. And you might know that Graphene and other other ROMs and operating systems exist that use Android. And one particular Graphene OS, which I use, I find it ever more difficult to have a Graphene OS on an Android phone, namely the Pixels, the Google Pixels, because Google now, like other companies, are basically locking their bootloaders, making it almost impossible for Graphene to be installed. And it's just, what I'm trying to say is it's just getting worse. And sometimes it's maybe a time to take a stand. And this is just my small way. So that's why I'm using, don't laugh, an X60 32-bit from 2006, running LibreBoot, running Hyperbola Linux. But hey, that's what I'm doing. That doesn't mean I'm literally avoiding proprietary software. I'm being smart about it. There's certain compromises I can't make, but you know. Anyway, that's my tangent. So you basically got two videos for one there. But I will do another video, or I'll stream on this situation. I still haven't really shown. But the thing is, there's no point showing Hyperbola Linux because all it is it just basically looks like my Arch setup with some variations because it's completely free software, right? Because of being a Libre distro. Anyway, I'll do a video on the X60 and the Hyperbola Linux. I was going to do one actually. My next disk stream originally was going to be me showing the differences I have with certain software, how I achieve what I've achieved on my previous videos, let's say, but with Hyperbola. I used a Fujitsu Amilo laptop with Vista once. Cool. Yeah, it's funny. I used to use all that time ago. I remember Vista. Everybody knows Vista if they are old enough, and they remember how bad Vista was to begin with. Then it was kind of okay. Was it like version 2 Vista? It was kind of all right, to be fair. I mean, I just remember I had to turn off all the animations, everything, on an older computer, and Vista ran all right. And it's funny, I start talking about Vista and everybody leaves, whatever. 9 people gone from 12. Anyway, Vista was okay back in the day. For a time. I know it increased the resources of the computer a lot, like Windows 11 did to 10, but anyway. Elmarine, hey Elmarine. New YouTube full screen mode is a dark pattern. Is it? What does that mean? I can't work that out. I'm being really thick. What? New YouTube full screen mode is a dark pattern. I don't know. Can you explain that to me, please? Because I can't really say that I don't use YouTube, but you know what I mean. I'm a Linux user. I do use YouTube, but you know what I mean. You know what I'm getting at. Personally, I do not use a smartphone, use torrents. How can I be a product? Personally, I do not use a smartphone and use torrents. How can I be a product? Well, you know what you're doing, so sounds like you've got the best of computing there. I probably need to ditch the smartphone. I can only use Verizon, and they're always locked the bootloader. New full screen mode proposes me some other videos if I press pause. That is incredibly annoying. Okay. I see. Well, I use YouTube, so I should know about this. Let's just say I use YouTube, if you know what I mean. So YouTube doesn't know what I mean, but you know what I mean. So I don't see this. I use YouTube, but I don't see these issues. 11 people. Okay, so I think it's time to talk about the World Wide Web. So first of all, how old is everybody in here? Put your age in the chat. Tell me how old you are. I'll give it a minute. 21, okay. 26, 38, okay. 49, 28, okay. 33, interesting. 54, okay. Now all the people who have put their age down, I want you to tell me, do you think the internet, or the World Wide Web, sorry, Do you think the World Wide Web has improved since you first used it? And when I say improved, do you think the World Wide Web was, say, when you first used it, better than it is now? And if you think it's better, do you think it was ever good? That's what I want to know. I hope that makes sense. You'll understand why I asked this. So just put, you think the World Wide Web was good and is good now, or never was good and is not good now, or however you. So give me a perspective of how it is now and how it used to be when you first used it, if you feel it is any different. Sorry if that's convoluted, but you'll understand what I mean and when I get into it. No, less free. Okay. So you say no, less free. I think it got worse. Okay. It was bad when I first used it. Iron Fist. So you're 49. So you're older than me. I'm 38. Okay. So I'm guessing you experienced the World Wide Web early on. It was good and it is still good. Okay. Ups and down, but now worse for wear. 94-ish. Okay. So you early adopter. That has improved. Internet speed, Ajax. Okay. All valid points. I understand where you're coming from. Okay, so what I'm going to be trying to explain here is, if you look to the title of my video, web segment due to different bands. Okay. If you look at the name of my video, I said the World Wide Web was a mistake. Okay, so bear with me, because via Gopher, technically improved, but less free. Okay, interesting. So I'm going to kind of tangentially or kind of talk about Gopher amongst this. So now I'm going to say about me personally, I think the World Wide Web is bad by design and was bad by design basically from the start. Okay, and this is not even in relation to Gopher necessarily. This is not in relation to any other protocol. So I started using the internet in 1996, I think. And when we got the internet in our family home, my parents said, we're going to get the internet. This is an amazing thing, okay? You're going to be able to experience the entire, you're going to be able to experience the entire world online, okay? You're basically going to experience, you have access to information. That was always the thing. You're going to have access to all the information you want. You're going to be able to experience this incredible technology. It's going to open your eyes. Learning is never going to be the same again. We're going to experience these amazing things, okay? I like just load a list of items at once instead of clicking a million times. Okay, interesting. So here's what happened. We get the internet. So we had AOL, which I think a lot of people had in America and around in Britain and other places. I'm hooked on this video. Good to hear. You won't hear this kind of stuff anywhere else, okay? And I'm going to explain why as well. So we got the internet. We had AOL. This is 1996. So this is the early-ish days of the internet. And started using it, and you sort of like, you're waiting for your mind to be blown. Now, obviously, it's the hype, right? We already know it's the hype. It's already setting you up for disappointment. But I used this thing, and I'll be absolutely honest, as long as I've used the internet, with few exceptions, I just find it or the World Wide Web, a huge disappointment, incredibly annoying, and really a massive sink of time. Now, what's interesting is that you would assume somebody like me, the kind of videos I do, about software minimalism and using old ThinkPads, and having something, would say the internet used to be good. Now think of funny enough, Luke Smith again. Now Luke Smith's attitude on this, because this is a counterpoint, right? The internet has got worse because there's a dead internet theory. Everything's AI now, whatever. And back in the day, before search engine algorithms, before companies got involved, although companies were always involved, and I'll cover that in a minute, the internet, or the World Wide Web for normal people, was good because you had artisan websites, right? You had handcrafted website. Everybody wanted a piece of the net, not just companies. You had your own little website about your own little thing, and somebody would find it and went through it. They'd go on a web ring and link through. The truth is, none of that ever happened. It's a complete misnomer, or it's a complete imagination. Most people never experienced that. Most people did what they always did with the internet, which is go onto the famous sites. So back in the day, it would be the search engines like Jeeves and whatever, and they would find these websites, but really they would be still going to the same cliche websites. They'd be going to, like if you had AOL, everything would be directed to AOL's websites, right? That's basically how it was. If you went to, you're going to search and you want news, you'd still go to the BBC. Nobody was looking at these websites. Now you might say, well, everybody has their own little niche. If you were a tech person, you would have your own, little group. That's fine. But here's the thing. I'm gonna delve down another layer with this, right? So first of all, I always felt it was a disappointment, right? I always felt that really I didn't find the internet a pleasant, or the World Wide Web, sorry, this is more important, the World Wide Web, a useful experience. Now, if you used it back in the day, you might have, I don't know, found your own little niche forum. Maybe it was good fun, maybe, but really, if you're thinking about the World Wide Web, the promise was information at your fingertips, right? And when I'm not just talking about Wikipedia, I'm talking about the whole of human experience in a computer. This is the promise. This is how it's advertised. Now, I know it's hype, right? Everybody knows it's hype. It's like AI's hype now, cryptocurrency hype. Every technology goes through a hype. But it was worse than that, because it was really a huge disappointment. And it was also a huge disappointment by design. So my feeling is the web was never good. If you can find the things that are good about the web, then really you've done what you've always done with the web. You found your little niche, okay, but you're not really experiencing, a great human effort. And I'll tell you also why this is. If you're finding your niche, you're finding what matters to you, you're doing again what humans do, right? You find your clique. And now you could say, well, that's great about the World Wide Web. But before the World Wide Web, there were different infrastructures for people. Was it BBS forums, or I can't remember. There were niches that people would go to find their thing if they had the internet. Now, I haven't got these pages. I will show you some things in a minute. Maybe I'll find the stuff I'm looking for. So there's quite a lot to unpack here, I think. So I'm just talking about my own experience, okay? Now, everybody's experience is going to be different, but I'm going to show you something in relation to the creation of the World Wide Web, which you might not be aware of. So everybody's aware of, let's actually share a screen. Okay. Let's just share the entire screen. Yeah. Okay. Right. So everybody knows the World Wide Web was made, right, at CERN, okay? CERN's the the physics laboratory Tim Berners-Lee created the World Wide Web. It was also other people involved. One of the people I'm going to highlight called Robert Cailliau. Robert Cailliau was very much involved with the World Wide Web, developing browsers and various things. Okay, now very early on, Tim Berners-Lee here made the World Wide Web really as a means to traverse the documentation at CERN. Okay, using hypertext transfer protocols, hyperlinks, having a server, their own server at CERN. They could, go through all the documentation and view it in a convenient way. You didn't just have to log into a computer for an IP. So if you think of the origins of the internet from ARPANET, and then universities got computers, universities had their terminals, right? They didn't have a computer. They had a terminal that went into either a supercomputer or a main computer, and they would log in, and then they would, work on that. Maybe they'd connect to another university, they'd exchange files and whatever. So really, this was a way to host everybody's data, so to speak, create pages that you could link through, as we know the internet now, like I'm doing here. Here's a hyperlink or whatever, it links through. This might be a document at CERN, it might be a whole list of documents here. Okay, so Tim Berners-Lee quite early on realized the potential of this, right? He realized it was actually somebody in America at Stanford who set up their own server, hosted, hundreds of thousands of academic papers, right? And anybody could access it, basically. And quickly, he realized the potential of this. Now, there was a rival protocol, and there are other rival protocols called like Gopher. So Gopher is a protocol of basically page linking again. I'm not going to go into specifically into Gopher because it's not really the point of this video, but it does kind of relate. So how are we doing it? I missed the decentralized net. Okay. Yes, I see what you're saying. You have to pick out the good parts out of the Unipole. Yeah, you do. But here's the thing. Now you might be thinking, all of you might be thinking, well, the World Wide Web is what it is, right? But it's not. The World Wide Web was a mistake. And the point about this is that when the World Wide Web was made by Tim Berners-Lee and involved by people like Robert Cailliau, it was made on this thing here, Next Computer, right? Now I'm going to go back to the chat. Say yes or whatever if you know what a Next Computer is. If you're older, you probably know what a Next Computer is. And while you speak of that, I never had AOL. It was a university, so just use Netscape or Mosaic first for AOL then. For me, PC and internet substituted for all other entertainment. I was the iPad kid before iPads. No. Okay. Right. So this is where the context is. So a Next Computer, I don't know if there's any images here. Here we go. Perfect, right? This Next Computer was the computer that hosted the first ever World Wide Web server made at CERN by Tim Berners-Lee. And it was on this PC. Or it's not, sorry, it's not a PC. It's a Next Computer, okay? And the important thing about a Next Computer is it is not a PC, right? That name looks familiar, but no, don't remember. Okay, so Steve Jobs, Hazar, Steve Jobs was kicked out of Apple. And then he set up a company called Next Computer, or Next, okay? And Next was a very expensive computer that basically wasn't popular. However, Next computers were popular specifically with scientists, developers, and these types of people at universities and
and well, places like CERN where they're doing physics, right? And the reason why they were popular is because you've got to put this in perspective, okay? PCs didn't exist in the 1980s, basically. You've got to understand a PC is a Microsoft computer. The computers that existed in the 1980s were things like NeXT computers, Macintoshes, and DOS, okay? And the underlying connection between most consumer computers was that you didn't really deal with graphics, okay? You dealt with a terminal and you program a terminal. You might have a game or something that displays graphics. You might have, some had like, you know, DOS, I think, started to have user interfaces, but basically PCs didn't exist, okay? PCs didn't really exist till the 1990s. Now, NeXT computers were a Unix-based computer. So this is pre-Linux. Linux doesn't exist yet, but Unix exists, right? Was a Unix-based computer with a user interface that is kind of like an early version of a modern Mac. I'm stretching the limit here, but it's basically an early version of a modern Mac or some of the modern user interfaces we take for granted now. Now, if you look at it, you might not seem modern, but this was way ahead of its time as a user interface. This is where you get the divergence from using a terminal, say like I do, to a complete user interface like maybe most people here do, whether it's Windows, Linux, or Mac, okay? So if you're on Linux, you've probably got KDE or GNOME. If you're on Mac, you've got Mac OS, right? And if you're on PC, you've got Windows, okay? So I say most, PCs were not really a thing, okay? PCs, you've got to understand, were a 1990s invention in the sense of the Windows user interface, okay? This is why people call computers Macs or PCs, right? Half your audience probably MPV into the frame buffer. That's why you're the best audience. Okay, so back to the NeXT computer. You need to, the reason I'm saying this, you need to understand the premise of this, okay? So just look here, right? So these things were expensive, £6,500 or £17,000 in today's money. Even then, for a computer, that was expensive, right? And these came out in the late 80s. So you can read this whole article. I'm not going to read it, but the point is, when Tim Berners-Lee was developing the World Wide Web at CERN, he was developing a system that specifically ran on a NeXT computer, meaning that the World Wide Web was not designed for the PC. And if you're wondering what that actually looks like, this here operated completely different from what became the World Wide Web. Okay, so this is the first ever web browser, okay, developed for the World Wide Web by Tim Berners-Lee. And if you actually look at how this web browser worked, it worked only, look at the operating system, NeXTSTEP, okay? It only worked on NeXTSTEP. Now, the important thing with NeXTSTEP is it does not operate like a PC operating system, namely Windows, right? So here's how it works. Now, forget what you're looking at in a modern web browser now. Think of the original web browser. Well, put in the chat what your original web browser was. Particularly if you're an older person in here, what was your first web browser? It might have been Netscape, Mosaic, maybe it was AOL, maybe it was Internet Explorer. Just let me know. Mosaic, okay. Netscape, okay. Internet Explorer. Okay, right. So, Mosaic. PC, yeah. Now also available for Mac, also available for Linux, right? Because it came out in '93. Netscape, the same. Internet Explorer, the same. On Sun OS, okay. Right. Now this is the problem. When Tim Berners-Lee made the World Wide Web on a NeXTSTEP operating system on a NeXT computer, the page rendered text only, okay? Those first editions of the World Wide Web displayed text only. Now, this is well known. Obviously, the web developed, but it displayed text only. What it did on a NeXT machine is every time you click a hyperlink, it opens a new window, not a tab, a new window. So, for example, you do have an image in a link, you click on a link and it opens a new window. Now, if you're on Mosaic, for example, and you click on that link, what happens? You don't get a new window. PC browsers were broken by design. The other thing, NeXTSTEP was a developer environment, okay? You've got to remember the World Wide Web by Tim Berners-Lee was not made for the public. The World Wide Web became for the public, for all of us. It was designed for a situation at CERN where you could easily navigate to basic science documents and pages relating to your work. All of this, it was really just an extension of historic systems developed at universities to navigate, but in a, let's say, a fairly advanced way with hypertext and having your own server, you know. But it was designed on the NeXTSTEP system, a completely different system to the PC. They never imagined making a version that was compatible with a PC. The PC architecture and idea was completely different. NeXTSTEP did things in a Unix way, but in a completely different way. And this is not even just me saying this, okay? So Robert Callaway was a co-inventor of the internet. So he worked on the World Wide Web a lot, okay, with Tim Berners-Lee. And what he said was that when he made when he had the first web browser made by Tim Berners-Lee, you can edit your web pages in the web page. Okay, so let me put this in perspective. NeXTSTEP had an this is where it gets kind of complicated, but NeXTSTEP had basically objects, right? And because it was a developer environment for software developers and engineers and whatever, there was no such thing as HTML. So I want you to understand that the first web browser didn't deal with HTML. It didn't even have a URL pane, okay? It actually had a pop-up, a separate window where you search URLs. So again, put this in perspective. If you're using Mosaic or Internet Explorer, you have a URL bar, right? Even today, you have a URL bar. No such thing. You have a separate window. This is a completely different system. NeXTSTEP, completely different. You have a separate pop-up. When you load a web page, you can edit that web page. You don't edit it in HTML. There's no such thing as HTML. You edit it in objects. Okay, it's a visual design element. You edit in objects. You basically type out the text. You don't type out HTML. Okay, there's no such thing as paragraphs and whatever. This was all invented in retrospect. None of this was designed to be. The World Wide Web, as we know it, was not designed to be like this. It was designed not literally like Gopher necessarily, but they share a lot of similarities. So Gopher was another competing protocol that focused on text, but you could have images as links, basically, or you could download it as a FTP or whatever. But the important thing of the World Wide Web is you click a hyperlink and it loads a new window, not a new tab, not a new page, a new window. If you have an image, right, it loads an image separately. It doesn't replace the page. The original internet web browsers, and even today, unless you call for a new tab, for example, loads over the same page. Okay, so if I click here and I click internet, that page is replaced. Now think of this in 1990. Okay, if you're at a university or you're at CERN, everything is kind of local. The internet hasn't spread its wings yet. Okay, but data transfer in that era is limited. It's better at universities, better at institutions like universities, science places. Data transfer on a local area network is going to be relatively quick. But if you're on the internet, and this is also why the internet was so bad early on, is if you click a link that's an image, you not only lose your page, okay, you have to load the new page, namely a whole image, on a very slow data transfer. Now, if you experience the early internet, you will know that a 56K connection is slow, and therefore an internet experience is abysmal. So what happened? So Robert Callaway explained this, and he explained it in his own words in the late 1990s. Hey, Sol. He explained this in the early 1990s. He explained, in the late 1990s, he explained basically the World Wide Web was a bit of a disaster. So this is from his own words, okay? Now, most people probably not aware of this. Everybody just thinks of the Tim Berners-Lee. Tim Berners-Lee pushing the internet for everybody. How fantastic. But Tim Berners-Lee's design of the internet is completely different. And his intentions early on were completely different. Now, things evolve. I appreciate that. But this is not evolution, okay? This is a complete dissolution of the original design principles. So Robert Callaway, who designed some of the first browsers with Tim Berners-Lee and others, had to port these to PC. You got to remember, these guys were in their own little world. Again, they weren't necessarily early on thinking about, okay, the whole world is going to have access to the World Wide Web. They're going to be able to have their own servers. They're going to have, their own place. They can hyperlink to different places. Then we'll have search engines, right? Thinking of the CERN world, they're thinking of the scientific world. This is how these people always did. Anybody who worked with the internet in academic institutions had the same situation. They were dealing with their own internal systems, okay? And by design, it was not for public consumption, because by then you had the PC. Windows took over, home computing. The PC was a completely different design. So what Robert Callaway, who was trying to port his World Wide Web and then the inline web browser and then what became Mosaic into the PC, it was horrific, because what he found was that everything it was designed for his convenience had gone. You load a web page, you have to replace the web page. There's no tabs, okay? You don't have things like tabs. Now, the important thing is you don't have new windows. The point is that when you click on a link, you open a new window. That's all gone. First huge compromise. The second thing is you can't edit the web page inline. What I mean is, so because they were dealing in their own little world, when you had a page at CERN, right, you edit the page and you edit it with objects. And the point is, what Robert realized, that the whole language they created to create web pages now, because nobody was using a Next computer. You didn't edit a web page in HTML. It didn't exist. You edit it in objects on the NeXTSTEP operating system. this is a concept that is hard to grasp, but it is completely different. It's a visual editor, and the page you're on that you edit, this is all internal. Okay, this was how these people work. This is how it was designed. Robert Callaway did not want to lose this. His problem was that when he made or worked on the Mosaic web browser, couldn't do that. This was a next step operating system feature. You didn't have this functionality architecturally in Windows. You had to have HTML. HTML, people love it. I hate it. I never like HTML. And this is where my sort of divergence from people like Luke Smith is. And this is where it's sort of coming full circle. My experience of the internet early on was terrible. Why? Because it was flawed by design. My experience of it was on the PC. So you've got a 56K modem. You go on some website, right? Now, the website, when you're browsing the web, you want to explore as much as possible. You don't want to hang around, yet you're stuck on some page that you don't even know if it's going to be good while you're waiting for your 56K modem to load text. And remember what I said earlier, if you click a hyperlink that's an image, it opens a new window. You don't lose the text in a next step operating system. You keep your original window. You let the image load and you carry on reading the text, okay? Think of this almost like a Unix separation. If you want to think of it Unix, it's a Unix separation. No, with a PC, I have to wait for that image to load, okay? And then I have to go back to the text. So what happened? The next worst design decision happened. Now you might think what I'm about to say is crazy. And I'm not saying this as just as a minimalist. I'm not saying this even in respect to Gopher. I'm not praising Gopher in this way, but basically they had inline images. Okay, so now you could clutter your web page with images. And here's the problem. This is where my issue with graphical elements are. If I'm looking at a web page, I want the information, okay? Now you might say, well, the information includes the pictures. Well, first issue is, particularly in those days, images load slowly. So I don't even know what information I'm getting. I'm anticipating that if I miss something, it could be important. Usually it's not. And here's the thing with images. If you really say, if you look at a tech article, okay? Now there are some exceptions, I know, and I'm not trying to be an absolutist on this because I know there are exceptions, but generally, if you're looking at information, you want information. The image is possibly not going to give it to you. Even think of news, right? Say if you think of a recent news article. Now everybody likes the distraction of images. Everybody likes, but a image in an article is usually just a distraction. I just genuinely think, and I'm a visual person because I like cinema, but really, when you think about it, I've never felt the internet has done images justice or given me anything worth having with a static image, I'm going to say. However, if I could load it separately, I can move on. Okay, especially in this, you got to remember, this is 56K era. Now, I know I'm belaboring a point, but I think it's an important thing. So the point is that by design, it was a mistake. All of that we're experiencing on the web was never meant to be experienced like this. HTML was an anomaly made to fit PCs, okay? Next Step would never have had HTML. Look up Robert Callaway, look at an interview he did in 1999. He will explain this completely. These were the people who actually made it. Now, Tim Berners-Lee was obviously, you know, the big idea man, right? Great engineer, great scientist, I don't doubt. But he knew he was onto something. Now, here's the other thing. Think about this genuinely, right? When I'm talking about images, maybe let me put it another way. think of the internet now, and think of the internet in the early days. What was the image that you would see all the time? An advert, right? Now you might see it as video now, but you could load it separately at first. You interesting. Yeah, very few images. What did the image become? My first impression, I disagree. Fair enough. But what is the image used on the internet for? Advertising. What is text used for on the internet? Information. Let me put it this way. The promise of the internet was that you were going to the Great Library of Alexandria, right? Think of the Great Library of Alexandria. The internet is fine. Yeah. The Great Library, they even called it the information superhighway. Okay, this was the promise. It was, you were going to experience all of human history, human future, human possibility, human communication, human connection through the internet. Now that's hype, right? We all know that's hype, but there should be a hint of truth in that. What did we get? Let's be honest about it. And this is in the context of inline images, right? Because what this gave, this design decision with HTML, having inline images amongst text, was to basically turn the World Wide Web into a shopping center, a shopping mall, if you like. Now, really, all you're doing is you're getting gratis, okay, a permission to walk through a shopping mall toll free, although you have to pay your service provider, to look at advertisement that you can purchase. The caveat is that, hey, if you look through the small print, if you look through the board, of shopping mall shops, there might be a library tucked in the corner, and you might be able to find some nuggets of good information. But really, the World Wide Web, and they said this at the time as well, they quickly realized, and I don't blame them, that the World Wide Web was a way to get your attention, to sell you things. I know, crazy, a cliche of a lifetime. Everybody knows this, but you've got to understand, World Wide Web you've got to understand the premise of what it was made. What the design decisions were not made in favor of a marketplace. If you have text only, when I say text only, I'm not saying like the internet would never, or the World Wide Web would never evolve. But if you have text only and hyperlinks to images, right? That means there's no oxygen for advertisers, because who's going to click on an advert? Seriously, think about it. Who's going to click on an advert? Think of whole JavaScript plugins, like you mentioned, ad blockers, to get that junk out of your face, out of your web page. The World Wide Web was designed not to have this. Its design was to completely separate this kind of content. I'm not actually advocating having no video, no images. I will say, I talk about proprietary. I will say I'm a big advocate of YouTube. By definition, I'm streaming on YouTube. YouTube is obviously really an advert platform that happens to have videos, but it's so popular and so successful that it's probably, one of the best achievements of the World Wide Web. Could you have had it under another protocol? Of course you could. But, there are good things on the web. But the web was a mistake by design. The original design of the web has no corresponding modern day equivalent, or the modern web is no equivalent to its original design. HTML would not exist. Therefore, JavaScript would not exist. Why did JavaScript exist? Think about this. JavaScript existed to give Netscape a plugin module to advertise, basically. You've got to remember, Netscape was a profit-making company. Netscape weren't this amazing benevolent company. They sold web browsers. You had to buy a web browser. This wasn't the free internet. Netscape had good technology, but it was malicious, again, by design. And Netscape couldn't survive without HTML, couldn't survive with inline images, couldn't survive without the design afterthoughts because of PCs. Yeah, who needs AdBlock when you have a Lynx web browser? But here's the funny thing. The Lynx web browser is fantastic. Yeah. What is the problem with the Lynx web browser? Everybody knows this. The problem with the Lynx web browser is that the World Wide Web is the problem for the Lynx web browser. Nothing works in the Lynx web browser because of the modern World Wide Web. If you had the original idea of the World Wide Web, the web browser would work perfectly. You would have websites loading like that. You could open a hyperlink and video like that, okay, in a separate window. And with modern internet connection speeds, you could have your window like a tiling window manager almost, but obviously, next step, you could drag the windows. If you want to load an image, it would load like that, obviously, in the modern web, but it'd be separate. Basically, there'd be a clear distinction with content. It should be a cleaner place. Because here's the thing. Another reason why the web, as far as I'm concerned, was always bad was because of people. And there's two things as well to remember here as far as I'm concerned. That even if you had the original design of the World Wide Web, or you had Gopher, or you had some other equivalent, and you had a proper separation between image, video, text, you didn't even have HTML, which I personally hate HTML. I think it's horrible. Robert Callaway, the co-inventor of the World Wide Web, with Tim Berners-Lee, with all these different things, HTML and all this stuff, he hates HTML. And he's absolutely right. I hate HTML. HTML is horrible. Genuinely. I can't think of anything more depressing than writing a web page. Sorry, I just personally do. Now, do I really want to write web pages and objects? But again, the design was for CERN employees, for the CERN. CERN is a huge institution, like a university, an internal system, using these computers, not PCs, that nobody else uses, okay? And maybe that's their fault, but they were building it for themselves. The design for the World Wide Web was for themselves. It wasn't for the internet. Tim Berners-Lee realized the capacity afterwards. He realized that what the technology created meant that as long as people could have an ISP, let's say, the possibilities were endless, okay? So, oh yeah, CSS. I hate CSS even more. Who likes CSS, honestly? And again, all of these are afterthoughts. Who likes JavaScript? Okay, I know it seems like this is a cliche, but this is where this is not even where I'm in agreement with people like Luke Smith. I'm actually, completely against the 90s World Wide Web. I think it's a design disaster. It's broken by design, okay? Would Gopher have fixed it? No, because here's the thing. If you think of Gopher, I think it would have been the same problem. Gopher would have overtaken the World Wide Web, right? Again, if you look at the history, Gopher was more popular than the World Wide Web. In 1994, 4 years after the internet was created, Gopher was huge. Gopher didn't have images, right? It had FTP to download images or view them, whatever. So why did Gopher fail? Because Tim Berners-Lee was clever. Gopher in 1994 went proprietary. No internet system can survive en masse, or let's put it this way. There's no free window, right? If you've got no free window to sell stuff to people, to get them to, how to put it, if you got to pay a toll to go in the shopping mall or the shopping centre to look at the advertisements, basically, maybe get access to a library. Sorry, computers. My X60's battery is about to die. I better turn this off. If you're in a shopping centre, either the ThinkPad is tired. If you're in a shopping centre, better plug this in. I will wrap this up soon, guys. Don't worry. I know I've been prattling them. If you're in a shopping centre, who pays a toll to go to a shopping centre? Nobody, right? Maybe some people do. God, that computer's making noise. If you're going to a shopping centre, you're going there to buy things, right? If you're going on the internet, you're probably going to Amazon. But if you had to pay a fee to look at the products on Amazon, you're probably not going to go on Amazon. And this is really where Tim Berners-Lee realized that if you're going to have a toll on the internet, or the possibility of a toll, nobody's going to be interested if people can't freely use it, so to speak. Maybe this is a whole other video. But whatever happened, so Gopher goes proprietary. Tim Berners-Lee makes it completely the World Wide Web open source. All the advertisers flock to it, all the ISPs, the United States government. Everybody's going to have access to it. Everybody's going to have access to that shiny window of advertisements, basically, because it was commerce. They knew early on that this was a commerce-rich environment. People were going to buy things, okay? So I know I belabored a point there, and I probably haven't fully formed that, but so how to summarize this then? So look, if you get a chance, look up. I'll put it probably in the description. Look up Charles Severance or Dr. Chuck Internet History, and look for the bit where he talks about the World Wide Web. Look for the bit where he talks to Robert Callaway, and just listen to what Robert Callaway says about his own creation, his co-creation with Tim Berners-Lee. A lot of it was a mistake. Okay, what they had designed bears no resemblance to the modern web. Yeah, dude that teaches Python and LC. Yeah. Now it's funny because if you watch that video, Dr. Chuck, as he calls himself, you know, I know nothing against him, great guy. He likes HTML. Robert Callaway hates HTML. I hate HTML. But these are the people who co-created this. You know, just think about that. Be interesting to know what Tim Berners-Lee literally thinks about it personally, from what he designed to what it's become. Anyway, so let's have a look at some of the comments. Oh yeah, here's what I was going to say. So when you think of people making content for the internet, even in the early 90s, most of it was just junk. I'm not even putting myself in a good category here. I'm not saying I make amazing things, and I'm just saying people in general. I'm not even an exception to this. I don't think people make good things. And actually, this isn't like trying to be elitist or snobbish or stop people from using the internet. But I think if the internet was less glamorous, right? Or if there were standards that meant that you could have a web page, but the protocol or the markup language or whatever it is, say it was Gopher, And I know Gopher would have developed with images if it had been successful. It would have basically become the World Wide Web. Let's not pretend. If it was open source originally, obviously it's open source now, it would have just become like the World Wide Web. The demand from people would have been that it was. So really the problem is people as well. And what I mean by that is most of the stuff made on the web, even then, was junk. Okay? If it wasn't selling you stuff, advertising stuff to you, it was just junk content. And again, I'm not even saying myself, I'm not saying myself that I make amazing things. I'm not trying to be an elitist in this way. I think humans have innate flaws in creative things, okay? And to make something worthwhile is very difficult. So, and I haven't really gone into this, maybe for another video. If you go back to the pre-World Wide Web, you have a very small niche who've made the effort to gain access to the web, or gain access to the internet, because you had like, I think it was like BBS forums and whatever. And there's possibly an innate effort there to make something worthwhile. If you've gone through that effort, maybe it matters more. You're not just there to sell adverts. I don't know. Maybe that's its own video. I've gone on far too long. I'm just going to read some comments and then we'll leave it there, I think. Browsing without a block is hell nowadays. The world's biggest library was the promise. Yeah. That's interesting. If I want to see more sophisticated content, I just download a PDF somewhere and it cannot be forced to look at anything but text. Don't quite understand that comment. I want to see more. I just download a PDF. Oh, okay. If you, well, it's separation. Okay. Let me put it this way. If you've just got text on the page, yeah, somebody could inject or have a piece of text that's like, hey, buy this, right? But what really happened was because the internet was so slow, or people didn't want to have their web pages refresh with just an image. Obviously, you could do that. They put the images in line. This is what HTML does, right? It allows you to display images in line with text. And what that really meant was it's just that an image didn't matter as much as the information. Or if you wanted the image, have it load separately. Don't slow it down, because you're sat there waiting on an old internet connection, waiting for this image that doesn't matter. And it's usually an advert. I just think by chance, that was how I experienced it. You can criticize what the World Wide has become, but you can still use it properly. Just install ad blocker. Yeah. Yeah, again, it's for, you've got to feel your way through it. This is what it is. Hello, brilliant title. Thank you. Here, I thought it was W3M. W3M does images, yeah. Web3 is bloated if you want to run modern web browser. The browser has to be bloated as well. Yeah, it does. Yeah, I mean, the modem web there to keep that in different technologies. James, website works in links. My website does work in links, yeah. You can apply this principle on every single means of communication between humans. Do you just think that humans shouldn't communicate because they ruin everything? Well, here's the thing. That's a good point, Ahmed. Well, what I'm saying is I'm not an advocate for restricting people, but what I am an advocate is for standards. And if people fall at that hurdle, so be it. If they really want it, then by all means, in the effort, understand the standard, or technology. I don't think it's a bad thing that everybody doesn't have. Let me put it this way. I think everybody should have access to technology, right? I'm a free software advocate. I'm a free whatever advocate, okay? But what I would say is that I don't think it's a bad thing if the price of admission is a certain understanding or a technical limitation. How to put this in context? So let me put it this way. If somebody's like, I want to go on Gopher, I would say, fine, go on Gopher, enjoy. Now, if they said, I don't like the look of Gopher, I'm not using it, I'd be like, okay. Now, what basically Tim Berners-Lee's attitude was, oh no, we must make Gopher fit for you and everybody. Okay. I don't think that. So I'm all for communication, and yes, people do ruin things, and I know that I don't know if it sounds harsh, but my site is part of the No CSS Club. Nice. CSS, I hate it. It was a nice technical challenge. Yeah, another JS lib, hold my beer. JavaScript's got awful. Yeah, damn right. This would tell me when you just abstain from using technology altogether. ThinkPad is tired. It is. YouTube for the most part. Sorry, dude, what's it? Yeah. Unless it's work, then it's emails. Paywalling efforts generally effective. Keep kids out. Yes. What's next, James? C sucks. Assembly sucks. Computer sucks. I think you came in my video late. Sorry. I think you arrived late to my video. So no, everything doesn't suck. If you watch the whole video, didn't Tim Berners-Lee write an essay on the web is broken in the 90s? Oh, did he? That's interesting. I know what video I'm watching after all this. That's funny because I think that this is cartoonish, Elisa. And James, would you do like Nelson Zanik hypertext system? I don't know that. This essay maybe from Eric S. Raymond. Not look up. Okay, I'll have a look at that. Wow, just seen your TTYSH. Looks cool. Okay, yeah, don't use TTYSH. It's kind of broken. Well, use it, but it's basically the configuration is broken, and it's basically I've made it for myself. But by all means, play around with it. I need to fix the configuration on it. It's broken in that way. So yeah, just to summarize, no, I'm not. I'm not elitist in the sense that I want to literally restrict everybody. But what I will say is I believe in standards because some things aren't worth compromising on, and the World Wide Web was a huge compromise. Hey, I've just got to be sincere about it, and the people who made it realized this. So Robert Callaway, seemingly Tim Berners-Lee as well. They did not design it the way it was intended. So Ahmed, if you look at the whole video I've done, I don't know how long this is, probably way too long, but that's not how I genuinely feel about things. I just do have standards, that's all. Now, again, these are probably standards that few people share. I don't know. I hope that explains. Just what I would say is just look at the whole video that I've put out, play it back. So there we go. It was kind of a long rambling video. You basically got two videos in one there because I talked about whatever. Can't even remember now. Okay, so I'm going to leave it there. Hopefully I covered enough. I feel that if you did arrive later in the video, you might assume I was just anti-everything, or you might assume I'm anti-everything. Like, learned a lot today. Thank you. Yeah, I worry that I don't really explain too well. I've been out of the game of doing these streams and videos, but I'm not convinced so far. That's fair enough. I'm glad you have your own thoughts on this, but I do. Yeah, I just want to clarify. I'm not advocating. I'm not anti-internet. I do make a distinction between the internet and the World Wide Web. Yeah, by all means, tweak TTYSH, fork it, whatever you want to do with it. I will one day work on the configuration. Now, there is an irony. I don't necessarily use the same TTYSH on the GitHub because I'm using a completely Libre system now. But yeah. So anyway, summary. Before I go, internet's good. Okay, the internet was before the World Wide Web. The World Wide Web is a mistake because the people who made it admitted as much, and there are still some good things about the internet, like YouTube, or the World Wide Web, like YouTube and whatever, and it is also kind of what you make it, but whatever. MVP 17 long run, James, we're going to win in this regard. Linux free software popular. Well, maybe we'll win some things. I think the stuff I'm saying, I don't think. So why did you pin the comment saying internet should have stayed in the army? Oh, well, I pinned it because I thought it was quite a funny comment. It kind of gets to it's kind of a satirical comment that basically the moment the World Wide Web was created, there were problems. Okay. Anyway, so I'm going to leave it there. Watch the video back. If this was Luke Smith, we would be butting heads. I never thought the internet or the World Wide Web was good, but I'm not anti it. I hope that makes sense. It's probably full of contradictions. By all means, put in the comments whatever you want to say. Say that I'm completely wrong. That's fine. Anyway, guys, thanks for taking the time. Thanks for disagreeing or agreeing. No, you're not being too harsh. But just all I'd say is watch the video all the way back if you can bear an hour and a half and see what you think. Anyway, guys, thank you very much. I hope to be on more regularly. Famous last words. See you later.